Have you ever found yourself sitting in an English class, staring at a textbook, memorizing rules about past participles, gerunds, present perfect continuous tense, and conditional clauses, only to find that when you actually step out into the real world and try to open your mouth to speak to someone, your mind goes completely blank? You know the rules. You can pass a multiple choice test. But when it comes to having a real, living, breathing conversation, you freeze. You stutter. You translate in your head from your native language, trying to figure out if the verb you are about to use requires a preposition or if the tense is correct. And by the time you have constructed the perfect sentence in your mind, the person you are talking to has already moved on to another topic. If this sounds familiar, I want you to know that you are not alone. Millions of people around the world spend years studying English grammar, believing that if they just memorize one more rule, they will finally become fluent. But today, I am going to tell you something that might shock you. Something that goes against everything you have been taught in school. Do not learn grammar. Stop studying grammar right now. If you want to speak English fast, naturally, and with confidence, you need to do something entirely different instead. Let us look at how you learned your very first language, your mother tongue. When you were a baby, did your parents hand you a grammar book? Did they sit you down and explain the difference between the past simple and the present perfect? Of course not. You listened. You watched. You absorbed the sounds, the rhythms, and the patterns of the language for a whole year before you even said your first word. And when you finally did start speaking, you made a lot of mistakes. You said things like, "I'd goed," instead of "I went." But nobody laughed at you. Nobody gave you a failing grade. Your parents simply repeated the correct phrase back to you naturally. And over time, your brain absorbed the correct pattern. You became fluent in your native language, not by studying rules, but by acquiring the language through massive exposure and meaningful interaction. This is the exact same process you need to use to speak English fast. The problem with traditional grammar study is that it turns speaking into a mathematical equation. When you study grammar, you train your brain to think of language as a puzzle, where you have to take individual words, apply a set of complex rules to them, and assemble them in the correct order before you can speak. This is called the translation method. You think of an idea in your native language, translate the words into English, apply the grammar rules to arrange them correctly, and then finally speak. This process takes far too much time. Native speakers do not do this. When a native speaker talks, they do not think about rules. The words just flow out of their mouths automatically. This is because native speakers do not speak in words. They speak in chunks. This brings us to the very first thing you must do instead of learning grammar. You need to learn phrases, or what linguists call chunks, instead of individual words and rules. A chunk is a group of words that naturally go together. For example, if you want to ask about the weather, you do not take the word how, the word is, and the word weather and try to figure out how to glue them together. You simply learn the whole phrase, "How is the weather?" as one single unit of sound. When you learn chunks, you bypass the need for grammar rules entirely. Let me give you a powerful example. If I ask you to make a sentence using the word depend, you might pause and think, do I say depend off or depend on? A grammar student will try to recall a rule about prepositions, but someone who learns in chunks simply memorizes the phrase, "It depends on," as one block. They never have to think about the preposition because it is baked right into the phrase they memorized. When you learn the whole phrase, the grammar takes care of itself. You are naturally using the correct preposition without ever studying the rule. So, your new goal is to stop memorizing single words from flashcards or vocabulary lists. When you learn a new word, you must learn the words that surround it. If you learn the word decision, do not just learn decision, learn make a decision. If you learn the word mistake, learn make a mistake. If you learn the word discussion, learn have a discussion. By learning these chunks, you are building a massive library of ready-made sentences in your brain. When you want to speak, you do not have to build a sentence from scratch. You just pull a pre-assembled chunk from your memory and use it. This is the secret to speaking fast. Your brain processes chunks much faster than it processes individual words. It is the difference between typing a letter one keystroke at a time and pasting an entire paragraph with one click. The second thing you must do instead of learning grammar is to engage in massive, comprehensible input. Input is anything you listen to or read in English, but it has to be comprehensible. Meaning, you should be able to understand the general meaning of what is being said, even if you do not know every single word. This is where the magic of acquisition happens. When you listen to English for hours and hours, your brain subconsciously begins to notice the patterns. You do not need a textbook to tell you that in English we say a big red car instead of a red big car. If you have heard enough native speakers talk, your brain will simply feel that a red big car sounds weird. You develop an intuitive sense of what sounds right and what sounds wrong. This is exactly how native speakers know grammar without ever studying it. They have heard the language so many times that errors simply sound off to their ears. To get this massive input, you need to surround yourself with English. Stop consuming media in your native language and switch entirely to English. Watch English television shows, English movies, English YouTube videos, and listen to English podcasts. But here is the key. Do not watch with subtitles in your native language. If you read subtitles in your own language, your brain will ignore the English audio and just read the translation, completely defeating the purpose. Use English subtitles if you need them at first, but eventually try to wean yourself off them entirely. The goal is to connect the sounds of English directly to the meanings without passing through your native language as a middleman. When you watch a video, pay attention to the context. Look at the facial expressions, the body language, and the situation. This context will help you figure out what the words mean without a dictionary. Do this for 1 or 2 hours every single day. Let the language wash over you. Do not try to analyze it. Just listen and enjoy the content. Over time, you will find that certain phrases start popping into your head naturally. You will start thinking in English without forcing it. Now, while input is the foundation of fluency, you cannot become a fluent speaker without actually speaking. This brings us to the third method, shadowing. Shadowing is an incredibly powerful technique that will train your mouth muscles to produce English sounds effortlessly and will bridge the gap between understanding and speaking. Here is how it works. You find an audio clip of a native speaker talking. It could be a podcast, a scene from a movie, or an audiobook. You listen to a short sentence, pause the audio, and then repeat the sentence out loud, trying to match the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as exactly as possible. You are like a shadow following the speaker. Do not just read the words on a page. You must speak out loud. The reason shadowing is so effective is that speaking a language is a physical skill. It requires the coordination of your tongue, lips, jaw, and vocal cords. If you have been speaking your native language for 20 or 30 years, your mouth muscles are perfectly trained to make the sounds of that language. They are not trained to make English sounds. When you try to speak English, your muscles feel awkward and slow. Shadowing is like going to the gym for your mouth. By imitating native speakers repeatedly, you are training your muscles to move in new ways. You are building muscle memory. Start with slow, clear audio. Listen to one sentence, pause, and repeat. Do not worry about understanding every single word when you are shadowing. The goal here is physical training and rhythm acquisition. Focus on the music of the language. Notice how the speaker's voice goes up at the end of a question. Notice how they connect words together, saying want to as wanna or going to as gonna. Try to copy that exactly. As you get better, try shadowing without pausing. Speak over the audio at the exact same time as the native speaker. This forces you to process the language at the speed of a native speaker. If you do this for just 15 minutes a day, within a few weeks, you will notice a massive difference in your fluency. Words will come out of your mouth faster and smoother because your muscles will know exactly where to go. You will also absorb the grammar naturally because you are constantly using correct, native-like sentences. The fourth thing you need to do is to embrace the concept of fluency over accuracy. This is a mental shift that you must make immediately if you want to speak English fast. When you are obsessed with grammar, you are obsessed with accuracy. You want every sentence to be perfectly correct. This perfectionism is the enemy of fluency. It is the reason you freeze up in conversations. You are so terrified of making a grammar mistake that you choose to say nothing at all. But let me tell you a secret. Native speakers do not care about your grammar. When you are talking to someone, they are not grading your sentences in their head. They just want to connect with you. They want to know your ideas, your stories, and your thoughts. Think about it. Have you ever spoken to a foreigner who was speaking your native language? Did they make mistakes? Probably. Did you care? Did you think less of them? No. You were just happy they were trying to communicate with you. You understood what they meant despite the mistakes. You need to give yourself that same grace. You must be willing to make mistakes. In fact, you should celebrate your mistakes because every mistake you make while speaking is a sign that you are actually trying. If you are not making mistakes, you are not pushing yourself to speak. So how do you practice this? You need to find opportunities to speak. If you do not have a language partner, you can talk to yourself. It sounds silly, but it works. Narrate your day out loud in English. Say, I am going to the kitchen. I am going to make a cup of coffee. Oh, the water is boiling. Where did I put my cup? If you do not know a word, do not stop and look it up in a dictionary. Use a different word or describe it. The goal is to keep the flow of language going. If you cannot remember the word for refrigerator, just say the cold box. It does not matter. What matters is that you kept speaking. You maintained your fluency. Over time, as you continue to get input and shadow native speakers, the correct words will naturally replace the wrong ones. But first, you must break the habit of freezing. You must train your brain to just talk, to keep the words flowing no matter how messy they are. Fluency is about communication, and communication is about making yourself understood, not about writing a perfect essay with your voice. Another incredibly effective technique to add to your routine is the use of what I call islands of fluency, or scripts. When you learn a language through chunks, you want to prepare a toolkit of phrases for common situations. Think about the conversations you have on a regular basis. You probably introduce yourself, talk about your job, talk about your hobbies, and talk about why you are learning English. Sit down and write out a short paragraph for each of these topics. But do not write it like a grammar textbook. Write it the way a native speaker would talk. If you do not know how a native speaker would say it, find out. Listen to podcasts or watch interviews and steal their phrases. For example, instead of writing, "My name is John and I am an engineer. I work at a company. I like my job," you might write, "Hey, I'm John. I work as an engineer over at a tech company. I actually really enjoy what I do. See the difference? The second version is full of natural chunks like work as, over at, and actually really enjoy. Once you have written these scripts, memorize them. Say them out loud until you can recite them in your sleep. These are your islands of fluency. When you are in a real conversation and someone asks you about your job, you will not panic. You will not have to translate and construct sentences. You will just confidently step onto your island and deliver your script. This builds massive confidence, and confidence is the fuel that keeps you speaking. Once you are comfortable with your scripts, you can start mixing and matching the chunks from different scripts to handle new situations. You are essentially building with Lego blocks. You are not creating blocks from scratch. You are just snapping pre-made blocks together in new ways. Let us also talk about the importance of emotion and story in language learning. The human brain is terrible at remembering dry, isolated facts, like a list of vocabulary words or a grammar rule. But the brain is a master at remembering stories and emotionally charged events. This is why you might forget a person's name 5 seconds after hearing it, but you can remember the plot of a movie you watched 10 years ago. When you are learning English, try to attach language to stories and emotions. When you learn a new chunk, do not just write it in a notebook. Use it in a sentence that is deeply personal to you. If you learn the phrase, "I was terrified," do not write, "I was terrified of the dog." Write about a real memory. I was terrified when I got lost in the forest as a child. When you attach the language to a vivid image and a strong emotion, your brain will absorb it instantly. You will never forget that phrase. Furthermore, instead of studying grammar rules for conditionals, just expose yourself to stories that use them. Watch a movie where a character says, "If I had known, I would have helped you." See the emotion on their face. Understand the context of their regret. You will internalize the structure of the third conditional without ever needing a teacher to explain it to you on a whiteboard. The context and the emotion do the teaching. Language is not math. It is an art form used to express the human experience. Treat it as such, and it will stick with you much faster. Now I know what you might be thinking. You might be saying, "But what if I need to take an English exam? What if I need to pass the IELTS or the TOEFL for my university or my job?" This is a valid concern. I am not saying grammar is useless. Grammar is a fascinating subject. And if you are studying to be an English teacher or a professional writer, you absolutely need to know the rules. And yes, if you are taking a standardized test, knowing the grammar rules will help you get a higher score on the written portion. But here is the truth. Even on those exams, the speaking section is graded on fluency, pronunciation, and the ability to communicate naturally. A student who speaks smoothly with minor grammar errors will score higher on the speaking test than a student who speaks haltingly and slowly but with perfect grammar. If you must study grammar, do it at the very end of your language journey, not the beginning. First, acquire the language. Build your vocabulary of chunks. Develop your listening skills. Train your mouth muscles with shadowing. Become fluent and confident in speaking. Once you are already speaking the language effortlessly, then you can go back and look at the grammar rules. At that point, it will not be a struggle. It will just be a process of fine-tuning. You will look at a rule and say, so that is what I have been doing all along. The rule will simply give a name to the pattern you already intuitively know. But if you start with grammar, you will build a wall between yourself and fluency. You will be stuck in your head analyzing instead of communicating. So let us review your new action plan. From this moment forward, you are going to put away your grammar books. You are going to stop translating word by word in your head. You are going to treat English not as a subject to be studied, but as a tool to be used. Every single day, you will immerse yourself in comprehensible input. You will watch English videos, listen to podcasts, and read articles that you actually find interesting. You will not watch them to study. You will watch them to enjoy the content, letting the language naturally seep into your brain. As you listen, you will actively notice the chunks, the groups of words that native speakers use together. You will write these chunks down in a notebook, not as isolated words, but as complete phrases. Then every day, you will spend 15 minutes doing shadowing. You will put on your headphones, play an audio clip of a native speaker, and imitate them out loud. You will train your mouth muscles to move at the speed of English. You will copy their rhythm, their intonation, and their connected speech. You will sound a bit silly at first, but you will push through because you know it is working. Finally, you will speak. You will talk to yourself, you will talk to language partners online, and you will talk to anyone who will listen. You will speak boldly and proudly, completely unconcerned with grammar mistakes. You will focus entirely on communicating your ideas. When you get stuck, you will find a way around the missing word. You will keep the flow going. You will rely on your memorized scripts, your islands of fluency, to give you confidence in stressful situations. Language learning is not about intelligence. It is not about how many rules you can memorize. It is about exposure, repetition, and the courage to open your mouth and make mistakes. You already possess the ultimate language learning software right inside your head. Your brain is wired to acquire language naturally. You did it once when you were a child, and you can do it again now. You just have to stop interfering with the process. Stop trying to control the language with grammar rules. Let the language come to you through listening. Let it flow out of you through speaking, and trust that your brain will figure out the patterns on its own. If you make this shift today, if you commit to acquiring English instead of studying it, you will be amazed at how fast your fluency improves. Within months, you will find yourself having conversations you never thought possible, speaking smoothly, naturally, and without fear. Throw away the grammar book, turn on the audio, and start speaking. Your journey to fast, natural English starts right now.